How do you feel about rejection? Silly question, right? Well, on the show today, we are going to meet with Biola. Biola works as a sovereign analyst in the asset management industry, and we're going to learn all about her area of expertise. We're going to be inspired by her career journey, and she's going to share some wonderful advice for us too. We also talk about finding your passion and knowing when you found it. We talk about finding a mentor and getting the most out of that relationship. We talk about extracurricular activities at work and how they are fantastic for growth, development, and raising your profile. We talk about the importance of values and happiness in career decision making. And of course, we talk about rejection and the importance of courage, tenacity, resilience, and self-belief in the face of rejection. So, enjoy the show. Biola, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Jo. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm really excited to deep dive into all your experiences and learn from all of the experiences you've had. So thank you so much. Okay.
You're most welcome.
Well, listen, how about we get started with you just sharing a short introduction about who you are, what you do, and how long you've been doing it for.
Sure. So my name is Biola. I am a sovereign analyst. So I have been working in asset management since 2012. So that's about 10 years. It's really funny how time has absolutely flown by. I first started off my career as a economist. I was looking at emerging markets. So just so we're all on the same page, emerging markets, those are the countries which are on a cusp of development. So are really doing lots of great things to improve the health, the wealth, the institutions of their countries. So they're not like your G7 countries, which are like, France, Germany, etc., but more think about countries like South Africa, China, etc. And so I started off as an economist there. So an economist is basically it's basically a glorified analyst who looks at economic data, looks at economic policy, monetary, fiscal policy, and just thinks about where our countries like to go in the future. Now, from there, I went on to move to Vanguard, where we met. Yes. And I joined as a developed Europe economist, and I did that for 3 years. And then I went back to where my heart is really set, which is my heart's very much set in emerging markets. And so I went back to I actually became a sovereign analyst. Now, a sovereign analyst is very similar to an economist, but you take it a step further. So you have all of the background of an economist, you look at monetary policy and fiscal policy, as I mentioned, but then you think about, okay, so how do I want to implement this in portfolios? So it's that step further, thinking about how do I make money for my clients? How do I make money for the portfolios that we're managing? And so for me, that's where the excitement comes in. It's not just analysis. It's not just thinking about where can we go, but it's actually about that implementation and seeing results of your ideas coming to fruition, hopefully.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Well, that sounds brilliant. I can't wait to get deeper into it in the conversation. But let's get warmed up. This is a podcast. I love podcasts. I think you love podcasts too. So tell us what you're enjoying right now.
So one of my favorite podcasts is I have to say I'm a big fan of Radio 4. I love spoken radio. I love audiobooks. I love all types of podcasts, but there's one which I just keep going back to again and again and again. It's called In Our Time, and it's led by a chap called Melvin Bragg. And it's all about taking deep dives into the ideas and the people who shaped our world. So, you have the setup is you have Melvin Bragg, who's obviously done quite a lot of research with his team. And then he invites on some of the eminent professors, researchers in the field, looking at a specific idea. So these ideas range from philosophy all the way to science. So an example of philosophy is Pandora's box and the idea about hope, which was left behind. is hope a good thing, or is it actually a bad thing? Why was hope left in this book of this box of ills? Another one, which to kind of show the science side, is looking at some of the latest inventions around nanotechnology and what does it mean, and AI. And so for me, it's a really good podcast to basically elevate your understanding of lots of different topics which you would never get to see or hear about in your daily life. So that's one of the reasons why I absolutely love that podcast.
Oh, it sounds amazing. And I haven't come across that one, so I'm definitely going to be checking it out. Thank you for sharing. All right.
You're most welcome.
Okay, so your role as a sovereign analyst. So often there are misconceptions about the roles that we perform. And so I would love for you to tell us about the common misconceptions about your role, and perhaps what your friends and family who are outside of the industry think you're doing all day.
Sure. So first off, most people haven't heard of a sovereign analyst. So as soon as I say sovereign analyst, everyone's like, so what is that? And then I just break it down and I say, oh, it's a glorified economist. And everyone's like, yeah, we've heard about an economist, but we don't actually know what they do. So one, just kind of breaking down, actually, it's someone who is a statistician, an analyst who likes to look at data, and it's mainly economic data, and going into thinking about the implications of what that means for society, trying to think about policy options, policy repercussions for measures which are put in place. So that's what I try to say about what a sovereign analyst is. But even just stepping away from my actual role, there's a lot of misconceptions about what I do in finance. And I get a lot of people saying, but you're basically a banker. I'm like, no, banking is a specific type of finance. Within finance, you have insurance, you have asset management, which is where my specialism is based. You have banks, but you have so much more. So first of all, just kind of debunk that misconception that all of finance is just banking.
Yeah.
Then the second misconception is, right. So you're an investor, but that's basically gambling. Like, no, it's not gambling. It's actually taking quite educated and informed views and trying to think about how that pans out in the future. And it's really important to highlight that, because a lot of people think, oh, if you're investing in certain assets, therefore you are basically taking a punt on what the future is. Well, actually, no, I would actually turn it around and say my job isn't really about betting or basically investing. It's mainly about risk management. Yeah. It's about trying to help clients reach their investment goals in a risk-adjusted manner. So that when the idea of risk is really important. So when a client, say it might be an institution, which is a pension fund or an insurance fund, comes to us and says, look, we have this pot of money, we need it to reach certain goals, they then also talk to us about their risk appetite. So how, you won't just put their money into any type of asset. You think, okay, I need to make sure that I'm putting it into an asset which matches their appetite for risk. So and when we talk about risk, it's their ability to weather ups and downs in the market, and understanding whether they can take that in terms of a financial point of view, but also psychologically as well. That's really important. So the idea of gambling, where you don't have any guardrails, is 100% not what we do. Yeah. And then a third misconception I generally find about the industry is around culture. So a lot of people, and I think this is best typified by a conversation I had with a very good friend of mine. And we went along to see The Wolf of Wall Street together. And for me, this is such an old school view of finance. But like midway through Wolf of Wall Street, she turns around to me and is like, that's what your work's like, isn't it? So it absolutely isn't. Like, that kind of culture where it's deeply misogynistic, highly drug fueled, is absolutely not an environment where I would thrive in. The people I know and my colleagues who I work with would thrive in, and that is not the environment of finance.
Yeah. Well, thank you for debunking that. Yeah. It's obviously a very entertaining film, but I don't think it's a true reflection on the state of play. Certainly not today.
At all. At all. Not at all.
Now, Biola, when you say sovereign analyst, I'm thinking sovereign wealth. So can you help me understand the link there? Or perhaps there isn't a link and that's my misconception.
No. You're quite right. So there is a link. So sovereign wealth, so that is, when you think about sovereign wealth, that's wealth of a country. So a country, when we think about sovereign wealth, we normally think about sovereign wealth funds. So we think about some of the biggest sovereign wealth funds could be from Saudi Arabia, or it could be from Norway. And it's generally because you have a state-owned enterprise, an SOE, which is linked to oil. And they get so much extra profits, which are seen as owned by the country, the sovereign. And so these are then put into a fund, which are then invested all around the world. So the key thing is sovereign. So sovereign means country. So when it's sovereign is a very posh way of saying country. So I'm a country analyst. I love a bit of fancy words, but it's basically like doing a deep dive into a country. Yeah.
I see. So do you specialise in a certain country or group of countries, and do other colleagues focus on other countries? Is that how it works?
Indeed, that's exactly how it works. So I specialise in, at the moment, I'm specialising in China and Asia. Yeah. And then I started off my sovereign analyst journey as being a specialist in frontier countries, in particular African countries. So that's like your likes of Nigeria, Angola, Ghana, Kenya. And now I kind of moved in my career to being a global sovereign analyst. So that's actually looking at all of emerging market countries. And then my current role at Macrobond, I'm more specialist in Asia, which I'm quite enjoying, actually, getting up to speed.
Yeah, I bet. Wow, that's really helpful. Thanks for explaining that. That's super helpful. So I think there's also misconceptions, as we just touched on industries. So I'd love it if you could just share with us, a high level overview of the asset management industry.
Sure. So within the asset management industry, you'd almost want to break it down into two. You have private wealth management and you have investment management. So more on the investment management side, it's institutional wealth. So I mentioned earlier pension funds, insurance funds, but they're basically large financial companies which pool the money of different clients. So when you look at your pension, when you're an individual saving into your pension, it goes into a pension fund, and that pension fund is pooled with lots of other people. And then the pension fund basically gives it to someone like myself to basically manage the money. Similar with your insurance premium. A lot of people, I think it's quite interesting, a lot of people understand the pension side, but when it comes to insurance, they don't quite, it's one of those ones where it's not quite seamless, the relationship. But when you have your insurance, you pay a monthly insurance premium. And then in the unfortunate event that you need to claim, you need to be able to draw that money out. So an insurance fund, an insurance company basically pulls all of those different premiums together into a fund and make sure that it grows and lies. So if there are a need for claims, say, unfortunately, there's a hurricane or there's a flood in your flat, you as an individual can claim that money. So that's one of what I mentioned earlier about making sure that people can meet those investment goals. That's one of the reasons why that is. And then on the other side, as I mentioned, is the private wealth side. Now, this is more looking at family wealth, individual wealth, high net worth individuals. In a similar fashion to the institutional investment management, we're still looking at their risk appetite and also their investment goals.
Got it. And if you had to give us a headline, what would you say that your clients rely on you and your sovereign team for?
So I would say they rely on us for risk. So this is probably actually, I was trying to say it in a sentence, which is not so jargon filled. I would say they rely on us to help them achieve their investment goals.
Yeah. Brilliant.
And so when I mentioned investment goals, that could be, their ability to retire, their ability to claim a insurance claim when they need to, their ability to buy that house, depending on what their investment goals are.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, if we kind of bring that to the real world, I'm thinking of, for example, BHS, they didn't have enough money in their pension fund to pay all of their employees. So that would be an example of a company that didn't meet their investment goals, right?
Exactly. That's a really good example. And that is the type of thing that we don't want to happen, whereby we want to make sure that most of our clients that we interact with, they're all long-term investors. Mm-hmm. So you're investing for 20, 30, 40 years. And that's a long time if you make a mistake, that's a long time for it to accumulate. So one of the things that we always say to people on the individual basis is try and invest and save early and save often, and keep an eye on things like cost, because that multiplies up. So in 20, 30 years time, that decision that you made quite early on in your career, it should bear fruit for you.
Yeah. Thank you. That's great. Okay, let's zoom in to an average day or week in the life of a sovereign analyst. What would we find you doing?
Okay, so one of the reasons why I love my job is it's because it's so varied. So I'll talk about an average week rather than an average day. So average week, I'll probably have lots of reading. I'll be doing reading of newspapers, local newspapers, it'll be international newspapers, lots of reading, lots of reports, things from international organizations like IMF. I'll be talking to the World Bank. So that's lots of reading. I love a read.
Yeah.
And then a lot of what I do as well is talking. So a lot of, I would say 3/4 of my day is talking to people about what I've read, having debates, discussions, because our industry is a people industry. It's all about ideas. So you ideate by talking, by debating. So I'll be talking to my teammates about what we like to do within our portfolios. I'll be talking to people, we call it on the street. So that's a industry terminology, which is basically covering people who are in your industry. So in finance, so when we say on the street, it could be investment banks who also we talk to, who have their own research departments, and analysts who might be seeing something different. We also talk to other investment houses as well. We'll be involved in roundtables. So there's a lot of discussion. And then the third aspect of what I do, which is, I would say, maybe 10 to 15% of my week is really on model analysis. So a lot of what we do as well is around data and understanding what the data is showing us and making inferences from that data. So we have quite a number of models where when data comes in, macro data comes in, they get updated, and so you look at what are the signals being given, and that also forms a basis of the conversations that you have with your team, with the street, and also with your other colleagues and other companies.
Oh, that's really interesting. And are you using specialist tools or programs as part of this work?
So we do. So we use Bloomberg quite a lot. So Bloomberg's great for data, but also for its communication tools. So our team, which is similar to a lot of asset management teams, is very international. So we have a team in the US. We have some people also in Austria. We have people who sometimes are in Australia as well. So different time zones, but you're constantly talking. And how do you constantly talk? Not necessarily on the phone, but through investment, IB chat. And then, so there's Bloomberg. Then there's also, for me, the specialist tools or specialist data resources, such as Macrobond. There are other ones out there as well. But they're very good for basically being a data repository. So love my data. And then also on top of that, we use things like Excel. Excel is a great workhorse for basically being able to do that analysis. And then if we want to do something more specialist, especially on my side, then we go to tools like EViews. But EViews is, I think, a little bit says something about my generation. I don't think the kids of today use EViews, they more use R.
Okay.
I'm probably showing my age. Some macroeconomic software EViews. I still like it, but R is the one that everyone likes to use because also they like to use Python and things like that. So all manner of data analysis, data on computational languages that you can use.
I see. Thank you. And if we're thinking about which other teams in the investment division that your team would interact with, you know, what would that look like for those that perhaps don't know?
So another reason why I love my job is because our main client as an analyst is our team. So it's the sovereign credit team, and more specifically, it's the emerging market debt team. So within that team, we have PMs, etc. But then outside of that, we are resources for the firm. So we talk to the rest of the fixed income group. So we'll be talking to, for example, people who are in the commodity section. So I am covering China, and China is a huge importer and user of commodities. So what's going on in their economy is an important driver for the rest of the global economy. So what we're talking about, what we're thinking is really important for the other investment teams to understand and know. So that's not just the commodities team, but that's also, you know, people in developed markets, interest rate teams, all of these types of groups. So our role is not just based on our team, it's very much across the investment team, but also not just across the investment team, across the company. So we are also seen as a face of expertise within these very important and politically sensitive countries like China, I mentioned, is a good one. Very, very important politically. So we are called upon as experts to talk on panels to the rest of the company, also to our clients, to help them feel informed about the decisions that they will be making.
Yeah, got it. So in the last few days, we've heard that China is opening up again to the world and lowering the restrictions on travel in and out. So I'm guessing this is a really hot time for you in terms of how that will impact the economy.
It's been fascinating. It's a hot button topic because the opening up is also coming at a time when caseloads are increasing, because a lot of the Chinese population isn't as vaccinated as we were when we opened up. So you're seeing a lot of cases, a lot of pressure on hospitals. Then with this opening up, there are questions around what kind of new variants could come out of China as well, given that the population isn't as vaccinated as developed markets. And then the second aspect is one of hope. So we talked about kind of doom and gloom about the vaccination and the hospitalization. But the hopeful message is people will soon be able to go out and about and enjoy their lives. So what does that mean for the rest of the economy? When the Chinese consumers are now able to go and spend, able to go out and enjoy themselves, consume goods, consume services. So this could be a really good positive for the global economy, and especially at a time when it's been lacking some positivity, let's be honest.
Oh, that's really helpful. Thank you. Okay, so if we were to zoom out a bit, what are the things that happen less frequently throughout the year that you'd like to call out for us?
So less frequently throughout the year, but is still a very important part of my role, is discussions that happen with policymakers. So we, as analysts, one of the things that is really important for this role is also being able to talk to high-level officials with respect, but also at the same time getting answers out of them. Because the thing that you'll hear over and over again in the industry is fiduciary duty. So fiduciary duty means that we are doing our level best to make sure we are helping our clients achieve those investment goals that I talked about. So part of that is also holding policymakers to account. So we get opportunities to talk to finance ministers, to talk to central bank governors, and even sometimes heads of states, and ask them about the policies that they've been putting in place. And then on top of that, we get to really drill down into, questions that actually sometimes that the people, their own citizens, might not be able to ask. So, for example, say there's been a policy that's been put in place around interest rate policies, which are actually having a detrimental effect to the local economy. We might be hearing that from local banks. We might be hearing that from private corporations. So it's for us to then go into these meetings with, say, the central bank governor or the finance minister and challenge them and say, look, you put in place this policy. We understand the motivation that you motivation behind it, but actually you're having this detrimental effect which is harming your local economy. What do you think about that? And then open up a dialogue with them and actually even give them suggestions about things that we've seen, and things that we have seen other countries do, which could be of interest to them. So that happens less frequently. I would say the main touch points where that happens is twice a year at the IMF conferences in April and October. So there you have all of the heads of states, all the finance ministers, central governors, all in one place. And we are able to set up small group meetings with them. Yeah. Outside of that, it's more of an ad hoc basis whereby you might have a minister, I don't know, for Indonesia coming to London, and he'll set up meetings. And then you will go along to those meetings. So again, as I mentioned, small group meetings where these type of topics are discussed and you have opportunities to challenge and to debate.
Wow, that sounds amazing. Thank you. All right. So tell us what you love. Tell us what you love most about your job.
For me, I say what I love most is what I just mentioned, which is the ability to see your hard work and your analysis bear fruit. So not just bear fruit for our clients, but also have a higher meaning, which is for society. Yeah. So one of the things I think, again, this goes back to a misconception around finance, which is that you're seeking profits at all costs. Well, actually, as an asset manager, our viewpoint is always long term. Yeah. So we're not looking for that quick buck. We're looking for long-term sustainable growth. And so for us, that's what we're always pushing for. And that long-term sustainable growth is economic development. And that lifts the wealth and health of people's citizens. And so for us, our focus isn't just on the money side. It's on more granular things like what's the health of the population like? What's the educational system like? What are their freedoms and the ability of people to express themselves? What's the judiciary like? Is there recourse to law? All of these kind of qualitative measures, which people don't really think is part of finance, is actually a core part of our research. Yeah. And so for me, that's where I get a lot of my joy, which is not just thinking about how am I going to make money, but it's also how am I turning up and doing a good service in the world.
Oh, I love that. I really love that. Thank you. Tell us about the biggest challenge of the work.
The biggest challenge of the work is information. So one of the things that is great about, the UK is that you have free and fair press. You also have lots and lots of people talking. You have lots of access to data. The difficulty, especially in emerging markets, is one, there can be a language barrier. So, for example, I'm very fortunate I speak French, but for those who don't speak French, getting access to information from Francophone Africa can be very challenging. The second thing is you're not actually based in the country itself, so you don't get access to all that local knowledge. Yeah. So again, you're relying on talking to people, having your own contacts on the ground who feed you information. And then the third aspect, which I talked about, which is still to do with information, is data. So your data collection, I think we're very, I would like to say we're basically a bit spoiled in this country because we have a fantastic data organization, the ONS, Office for National Statistics. Other countries do not have that because it's highly expensive to have be able to collect data, but also to rigorously test that data is clean, proper, and fit for purpose. So that's another challenge, which is you're getting data, but you're not sure whether that data is fit for purpose, and then also you don't know if that data is being politically manipulated. So there are cases where, especially around inflation data, where you can look at certain countries around the world where it's very politically sensitive inflation data, and so there's a massive underreporting of what that data is.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. Yeah, because you need your information. You need the information to do your job. If you can't get the information, it makes your job harder, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you. All right, Biola, let's take it all the way back to the beginning. When you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
So when I was a kid, I was heavily influenced by Ally McBeal, and so I really wanted to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
I mean, like I went through so many different phases. I wanted to be a lawyer, and then I wanted to be a biologist because I got a one of those toy microscopes for Christmas from Hanley's, and then I wanted to be a chemist because I got a chemistry set. You can see there's a theme here, and then Ally McBeal came with my teenage years when I found Ally McBeal, like I want to be a lawyer.
Yeah. So what kind of I guess, did you take that dream further and kind of plough that into the education choices you made, or did something happen to quash that lawyer dream?
It wasn't necessarily quashed. It was more that I was very fortunate to meet people who were in the legal profession. Mm-hmm. And then also we had a good career service at our school, which had lots of these kind of books. And so I sort of started reading about what it takes to be a lawyer. And I realised I used to love, and I still do, I love reading.
Yeah.
But I'm not a big fan of reading non-fiction, so that's a bit of a non-starter as a lawyer. And so I just knew that that would be absolute torture for me, like spending hours on end, like reading lots of like case notes. I mean, no. But I knew I was really good at maths, and I knew I really like politics as well. And so I was looking for something which marries the two together. And then some of my friends were talking about economics. And then I went along to a sixth form open day where they were talking about all the different subject talks. And then one of them really stuck with me. It was around economics, and just, you know, when a lot of people think about economics, how it's studied now, it's very math heavy. It's almost like a math applies course. But actually at the basis of it, it's a humanity. Yeah. And what a humanity is, it's a subject which looks at human behaviour and how they interact with each other. And the economics talk was all about, okay, so you're looking at economic development in Indonesia. Like, let's discuss how we can think about this. How do we help build schools? How do we help build hospitals? How do we help economic growth? And then the flip side was, okay, let's put it a bit closer to home. So, you know, you all know what the Bank of England is. So tell me about, you know, how does that interact with your ability to go and buy your flat, or go and buy your first car, you know, or your ability to go to university. And I was like, what is this? Like, this is finance. And it's like, no, this isn't finance, this is economics. Yeah. And that was how I got introduced to it, through the big questions that it tries to answer.
Yeah, that's really cool. And when you were at that talk and hearing all those topics, what was it in you that thought, yeah, this could be right up my street?
So I think for me, it was really around topics around monetary policy. Yeah. I know that sounds very dry, but actually I really like the idea that you're able to change one or two policy instruments, you know, just by, you know, such a small amount, and have huge consequences for the rest of the economy. How you can actually slow down a whole economy, how you can, you know, you can slow down a whole economy, but how you can speed it up, how you can encourage opening of businesses, how you can reduce unemployment, how you can, you know, do so much by just something so small. It honestly blew my mind.
Yeah.
Like, how on earth could that happen? But it, you know, it's the power of economics, which is the interest rate, especially set by the Bank of England, has an impact on so much finance across the UK. has your impact on your mortgage rates, as we've seen recently, has impact on your ability to get a loan for a car, also student loan as well, has impact on your credit card. So it has impact on if you want to save for your holiday, what interest rate are you going to have? It's also linked to that of the Bank of England. So for me, this was just, as I mentioned, it kind of blew my mind. I was like, wow, something so small, you have to be so careful if you're going to have such an impact on people's lives. So that enormity just really struck me.
Yeah, wow. Well, thank goodness you went to that talk.
Indeed, I'm so, when you look back on life, you just think about all of the little circumstances which help put you in where you are now, and I think that was one of the circumstances. Having someone who is an economics teacher who is so passionate about their subject, that was so inspiring. Yeah.
So on the back of that talk, did you decide to study economics at uni?
I did. So I went I went on to study economics at A level. Yeah. And I learned what A levels I needed to do in order to go and study economics at uni. So I knew I needed to do maths and economics and then 2 other subjects. So I did politics and French. Yeah. Just because I'm not the best at languages, but I do like them. And I've always had like a passion for French anyway. So I just knew kind of what I wanted to go along and do. So so that was my choice of A levels, and that helped take me to Warwick, which was where I did my economics course. And I actually, thankfully, I was glad that I did my French A level. And one of the reasons why I chose Warwick was because they offered the Erasmus program. So you were able to apply for a scholarship to go and study in Paris. So I applied. I was very fortunate, got in. And that's because I'm from a very small part of London. I'm from Brixton, South London. Mm-hmm. And I'd only ever stayed in South London. I'd never gone off to explore the big wide world. So I really, really, really wanted to do that. Yeah. And it was phenomenal studying economics in Paris was just, I mean, it was a chance of a lifetime.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. So was that that Erasmus program, did that mean you took a term or a year's learning and did that in Paris as part of your degree? How did that work?
So it was actually an extra year. So I did, between my second and third year, I went off to did a year in Paris, and I studied economics there and made a lot of really good friends who are still my best friends today. Yeah. Also saw another way to study economics. Because when you study economics in the UK, it's very much of the Anglo-Saxon mindset, which is heavily mathematical. Mm. And what was great going to Steele's Po and studying economics there was it was much more around the applied nature of economics. So it was all about economic policy. It was all about how does economics influence urban lifestyles? How does it influence foreign exchange policy? How does it influence international relations? It was very, very applied. And for me, that was one of the reasons why I chose to then with full steam only choose a route to be economist. One of the great things about studying economics is it's almost overwhelming the number of career choices you can go on and do. Yeah. Because as an economist or an economic student, you have a very good way of analysing and approaching different problems. You're very analytical, so you can go off and do lots of different things. So then narrowing it down is quite tough. But having done that year abroad, I knew that economics and being an economist was for me.
Yeah, brilliant. And what was it about those two choices how did you know they were for you? What was it about those that sparked that passion for you?
I don't know. It's one of those things where, when you are happy to, it's almost like you dream about it and you you daydream about doing the role. And that sounds really, really weird to say, but when you find that, that's kind of when you know that that's your passion. So, I kind of gone through my first and second year of university, and I liked economics, but as I mentioned, it was an applied maths course.
Yeah.
It felt like an applied maths course, and so I wasn't necessarily very passionate about it. And then it was only when I went to Paris I became really passionate about it and started thinking, okay, so rather than going along the tried and tested route of going into an investment bank for an internship, maybe sales and trading or something like that, I'm actually going to go, and I wrote maybe 150, 200 emails to economic consultancy firms in order to just be able to go off and do a work experience. Unpaid, I said, look, I'm really interested in this. I would like to do something in town planning and urban development as an economist. You have an economics team. I would love to be able to see what it is that you do. Yeah. And when you're willing to work for free, it's kind of like, you've got the bug.
Yeah. Wow. And did you get some responses from those 150 emails?
I got one, which is more than enough. And I got one. And I was really happy. And I actually went along and did a work experience for 3 weeks there.
Yeah.
Roger Times and Partners in London. And they were, I was able to work on a Ministry of Justice project looking at the economic impact of new prisons. Yeah. And for me, it's like a second year graduate, economic student. I was like, wow. This type of analysis is actually going to be used in development of prisons. And this actually has a real world implications and real world. It's not just doing something or writing a report or writing something which just basically gets read and then just goes somewhere, gets shuffled away somewhere. This actually has an impact on people's lives. Yeah. So for me, that was exactly why I knew every type of job I want to do, I want to make sure that I'm having an impact in someone's life. Yeah. And so that's always been a theme throughout my career.
Wow. I think there's a really great lesson there. You sent 150 emails out and got one response that thankfully was a yes. Yeah. But I think that so often, we might stop at 5 emails or we might stop at 10 emails. And I think what you did there was you had the courage to write the email in the first place, and you had the courage to send it out that many times. And I think that's a really great lesson for all of us, I think. Yeah.
So I would say a lot of my career has been like that. I mean, when you look on LinkedIn or you look on a CV, all you see is the successes. You don't see what actually went on behind there and how many no's you had to endure in order to get that one yes. And that's the thing is, if you are passionate, if you believe in yourself, which I do encourage people to do, keep sending emails, keep trying. All you need is one yes, and then you're golden. So keep trying until you get that yes.
Yeah. That's brilliant. Thank you. And I don't want to dwell on it too much, but when the first few no's or non-responses started to come through, for anyone that isn't, struggles with that self-belief and self-confidence, how did you kind of stay focused on, there will be a yes, I'm keeping sending the emails?
I mean, rejection is not nice. It's not nice, and it does get to you. And I remember sending those emails. I remember even, when I went for my graduate job and getting to the final round of quite a high, like a really well-known institution. And then just feeling like when I got that rejection, I was like, it sucks. Like, come on, like it really, really sucks. Yeah. And you just have to sit in it sometimes. You just have to sit in it and just know that it will pass. Because, by like beating yourself up that you feel bad, it's not helpful. Like, for me, one of the things I've definitely, and this is genuinely in life, is like, if I feel bad about something, I won't try and say like, oh, you need to get over it because someone else is in a worse situation than you yourself. It's like, no, acknowledge it. You feel bad because there's a reason why you feel bad. You were rejected from like 50 jobs, and you probably feel like, why am I getting rejected by so many people? Like, is there something wrong with my CV? Is there something that I'm doing wrong? And that's a chance where you can actually think, okay, maybe I change it up a little bit, or no, like this is a nature of putting yourself out there. And I think especially if you're a young person and you don't have any experience, it's so tough to get your first break, because people will be looking and saying, well, you don't have any experience, so why what good are you, what help are you going to be to my company? And it's just so frustrating because, and I remember it so keenly, unless you give me a chance, I'm never going to get experience. And you want experience, but unless you give me a chance, I won't get that experience. So you feel like you're constantly in this like loop, which is trapped.
Yeah.
And one thing I will say is that keep on pushing, because you just need one, and you know you will get one, because if everyone else can get one, you can get one too.
Yeah.
But what you don't see is how many like tries how many times they've sent letters, how many times they sent emails. You don't see that. You just see that, oh yeah, they're off at like this big job, but you don't know. You don't know how many. And not only that, I would say this applies to not just your first emails out or your first letters. This also applies to interviews. So you're honing your letter, you're honing your emails to the ones which, and you kind of nailed it to the emails which are getting responses. Then you go to the interview stage. Now, again, you're going to have to learn experience about interviews. And I remember my first few interviews were absolutely... I remember one of the first ones that I had, I actually just like was so nervous, I hung up. I picked up the phone and I just like accidentally hung up. I'm like, oh no. And so you like learn to like deal with your own nervousness, but you also learn like what responses they're looking for. And you know what? You will go through interviews and you will get rejected as well. And again, it's the same thing. Remember what you did with the emails. You have to iterate. You have to keep going through the interviews. Keep iterating, keep going. And then you will get that one yes, because you will get that one yes.
Yeah, yeah. And how did you feel when that one yes came?
Oh my goodness, I was just, I've never celebrated so much. I was so happy. I remember when I got my first graduate job, and I remember when I got that letter from Roger Times, I was so happy. I remember I just went to my dad, I was like, Dad, there's one person who said yes. And I remember also just being so nervous about what to wear on the first day and all of that type of those jitters. Oh my God. Wow, that takes me back.
So, I mean, I can't tell you how many people I've recruited over the years, okay? But my favourite calls of all, well, obviously making an offer to somebody is just the best feeling in the world. But my favourite calls were if I was calling to offer somebody an internship or a graduate programme, because no matter where they were, they would be so excited and you could just hear that excitement in their voice. And you know, you knew you were giving someone a chance to maybe change their life and their circumstances. And yeah, I loved making those calls. So, well done to that company.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, shout out to them. So you had your third year in Paris, and then did you come back to Warwick for the fourth year of your course?
I did, yes, yeah. Finished my fourth year for my course, and then I went on to do my master's in applied economics.
Yeah, okay, great. And then after that master's, is that when you took this job, or was there a different job there after the master's?
So after the master's, I went to work for a economics consultancy firm as an economist, and that was based in Oxford. Yeah. And then after that, I moved into the asset management industry and haven't looked back.
Oh, I love it. Thank you so much. So we touched on the journey through the roles at the top of the conversation. But perhaps you could just share with us the highs and all the challenges of that journey from uni to where you are today.
I think one of the challenges that comes front to mind has been study part. So one of the industry standards is having passing the 3 levels of the CFA qualification.
Yeah.
And that was incredibly challenging to do whilst getting to grips with a new job.
Yeah.
And that was getting to grips with being a sovereign analyst. And it takes a long time. And this is, when I mentioned about being able to bounce back from lows. So one of the lows was failing one of the exams and having to, knowing that you've put so much time and energy, you put your whole life on hold in order to pass the exam. And this is in your 20s when everyone else is going out and having fun. Then you can't take part in that. I think that was definitely a low, but then passing those was a high.
Yeah.
And I think those are some of the challenges of working in industry. So another, for me, I would say, high or challenges of the industry is it's a people industry. So the highs are getting to know people, the lows are getting to know the people.
Yeah.
And when I say the lows are getting to know people is just making sure that you have the right support and getting access to that. So I was really fortunate at Vanguard. I had a lot of support. I had great mentors. I even had a sponsor as well. And you'll probably go into the difference between mentors and sponsors, but briefly, mentor is someone who helps guide your career, helps you navigate things which might be going on in your daily life at your job. And a sponsor is someone who's much, much higher level, who is basically helping to open doors for opportunities for you to grow in your career. So it's someone who, for example, one of the big ways of getting experience as someone who is in a job is to do extracurricular things. So being part of, a charities community or social community or something like that allows you to demonstrate leadership and get other skill set which you might not necessarily get in your current role. So a sponsor helps you get stuff like that, helps also navigate different roles, also at kind of high tables, also advocates for you on your behalf. So I think I was very fortunate to have a sponsor at Vanguard. I think the challenge is having those in other companies as you go along your career, because I think that's quite important, especially as, to be honest, women and Black people and people from definitely minority groups in finances, making sure that you have people who are advocating for you, not just mentoring you, but advocating for you on that high level. That's how people get those opportunities. So I think for me, that's been part of the challenges as I've gone through my career, is making sure that I have those and as a result, stay within the industry.
Yeah, thank you. And how, for somebody that doesn't know, how do you go about finding a mentor or a sponsor? What does that process look like?
So finding a mentor is, in my view, what I've seen work really well is being proactive. Yeah. So going along to a lot of your company events and seeing people speak, seeing who is interacting, and also thinking about what are the areas that you need to work on in yourself, and trying to find people who can match those skill sets. So, for example, I mentored someone who actually was senior than myself, but one of the things that they were looking for was help on relationship management. And so I was able to share what's worked for me in terms of managing relationships and also intra-team projects, because I do a lot of those. So when you're thinking about a mentor, don't always think about someone who's more senior, but also think about someone who could be more junior or on the same level as you. But the key focus is, bridging that gap in your skill set. So being proactive, going out and seeking them, being quite conscious about what you're missing, and then just going out and emailing them and getting in contact. Most people will say absolutely yes. I mean, it's a gift and they would love to give that gift. And then the next step for you is also being quite clear about the expectations for the mentor.
Yeah.
Because one of the things I've seen quite often is that people know that mentors are a good thing, but they don't know how to get the most out of them.
Yeah.
So being quite clear about, your expectations, how often do you want to meet, what content of the meetings will be, and then also try and set like agendas ahead of the time, which will help not only you get the most out of the mentoring relationship, but don't forget as well for the mentor, they get something out of that as well. They get an insight into, okay, what's your journey? They build and they come to know you. And also a mentor can later on, if that mentor becomes more senior, become a sponsor as well, because they've come to know you. Now, getting a sponsor is much more challenging. Now, a sponsor is someone who is generally, they can be C-suite, they can be the level below C-suite. And when I say C-suite, that's your chief executive, etc. And so the best way to get on their radar is to make sure that you are interacting in as many, I would say, high profile things that you can do in your organization that's possible. So for example, for me, one of the things I like to do is make sure that I give as many company presentations as I can. So I'm educating and informing the company, but at the same time, I'm also getting in front of quite senior people who then come to know my face. And then they can make a decision whether they want to sponsor me or not. Another way is once you start increasing your profile, another way is making sure that you also follow up with people who you think would be really great sponsors. So you make sure that, you're in front of them, they see you multiple times. They also then start to see what you are like in your work. So that they start to feel comfortable about advocating for you on that higher stage. But trust me, getting sponsors are tough. So it's easier to get a mentor. It's tougher to get. It's still challenging to get a mentor, but it's very, very challenging to get a sponsor.
Yeah. So start with mentors for now. And
exactly.
Actually,
start with mentors for now.
and for somebody who's feeling a bit nervous about asking someone, or they don't dare send the email, or they're worried about being a burden on someone's time, you just touched on it there. A mentor benefits too. So can you share with us the best thing about being a mentor?
I think for me, the best thing about being a mentor is you're sharing with the joy of that person. So their success is your success. And one of the things that I absolutely love to see is when my mentees, they succeed, they fly, they also come, and I love seeing them problem solve in front of me. So I'm not the person who's coming along with the ideas or the answers. I'm just giving them a space and a framework in which to challenge themselves and to work through ideas. So for me, that's where the joy comes from. It's not necessarily being like, oh yes, it's because of me you did well. It's actually no, I'm really happy to see and help you find within yourself, because you do have the answers within yourself, the answers to your own problems.
Yeah, thank you. Well, hopefully that puts some people's minds at rest who are a bit nervous about that. Okay, thank you. So if somebody's thinking, I'd really quite like to be a sovereign analyst, I'd like to find out more, what education or training would you say is either essential or helpful?
So I would say definitely thinking about the degree that you go off to do in university. I think that's important. I think we definitely moved away from being so economics only heavy, and actually, you have a lot more degrees, people with degrees coming into being a sovereign analyst. To be honest, the key thing for a sovereign analyst is interest in world affairs. I mean, most of my job is basically keeping up with what's going on around the world. And if you're interested in that and you're willing to follow that, that's all you really need. It's not, and through osmosis, through that reading, you'll kind of come to understand what are the drivers of a lot of policy. So you don't necessarily need to have a formal education in it. It's just an interest in how the world works, really.
Yeah.
I would also say, if you're interested in finding more, one thing that I love, which is goes and ties into your question around mentors. So flattering being asked. I love being asked for my time to like talk about what I do for work. You know, we are very present on LinkedIn. The thing that I do love is when people drop me a note on LinkedIn and say like, hey, I'm really interested in working in asset management. I saw your profile and I was wondering if you had 5 minutes or 10 minutes, I could take you out for a coffee. I love coffee. I will be buying though, because like I love coffee. And like I'd love to hear a bit more about your journey. And it's so flattering. And most people say yes.
Yeah.
Like this is not a job interview. Like most people say yes, and they would love to impart on you how they got there and stuff like that. So yeah, that's for me. That's kind of the two steps. One, an interest in current affairs and world politics, and second, just go and talk to people on LinkedIn.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you. And obviously, if this podcast becomes a huge success and you're getting thousands of LinkedIn requests, Biola, perhaps we'll do a part 2. We'll do a follow-up with a Q&A or something.
Yeah. I'm here for that.
Brilliant. Okay, if we think about the non-technical skills or soft skills that, you know, make for a great sovereign analyst, what would you call out those as?
So communication and persuasion are two top ones. You need to be able to communicate quite complex ideas in a way which is easily digestible to different audiences. So you also need to be able to tailor your message and persuade someone of your expertise in that field. So, for example, if you're talking to another economist or analyst, they will love to hear and go into the weeds of the detail of, you know, what's China's remittances looking like, and where is it coming from. You do that with a portfolio manager. If they are your friend, they'll be politely ask you to to stop. If not, you might get a more forthright answer. So they will be more. The portfolio manager will be much more interested about. Okay, so what does this mean for my portfolio?
Yeah.
So Chinese remittances coming in. That might be meaning that you'll suddenly see a much higher uptake of consumer non-durables, such as going out to restaurants or going buying takeaways or something like that. So then that might be interesting for a portfolio manager who's investing in like Deliveroo or the Chinese equivalent of that. So that type of thing. They will want to hear the outcome rather than the reasoning. And if they're interested in the reasoning, they will ask you. So it's understanding how do you persuade and how do you communicate. Those are two key skills. And then, of course, the analytical skills are important. Able to reason. The interpersonal skills are very important. We spend a lot of time talking to people, working with people, not just in our team, but across teams as well. So all of those are quite important. But I would say the two that come to mind, communication and persuasion skills. And that's not just communication on verbal, but it's also written as well. How do you make sure that anything that you write is to the point and also engaging?
Yeah, I think that's it, isn't it? I think sometimes when we think about communication skills, just being able to talk well, but actually, I think it sounds to me as though you're talking about effective communication there. So what does the person need to know? Why is it going to be important to them? And like you said, if they want to know more, they'll ask you, because sometimes in these environment, it's information needs to be there and there quickly. And there's not necessarily time for the 4-page essay response.
Exactly. Yeah, there's rarely time for the 4-page essay response. I'm going to be honest.
Yeah.
Rarely in our industry.
I interviewed one of my mentors actually a couple of weeks ago, and I worked with her about goodness knows in 2008-9, and I was recalling with her the time I sent her this big old email, probably about 5 paragraphs, and she just wrote back yes and yes, and I was like, oh, okay, I guess that's how we do it.
Yeah. It's I think when you first join the industry, you want to, because you're so nervous, you want to make sure that you want to demonstrate your expertise.
Yeah.
And then you realise that people are like, well, you're in this job, so the assumption is that you do know what you're doing, so you don't need to convince me. I'm already convinced.
Yeah, it made me laugh.
Yes, yeah. That's a perfect one. I think I'm going to start using that now.
Yeah, yes and yes. Okay, cool. Oh, brilliant. Thank you for sharing. So what does the future hold for this industry? I mean, it seems to be pretty bright from where I'm sitting, but share with us.
It is. I think for us, one of the things that we're kind of grappling with is the ESG aspects and this green investing. So one of the things, as I mentioned, it's all about trying to meet the investment goals of our clientele. And the clientele is becoming much more conscious around environmental, social and governance issues. And so it's making sure that we are able as an industry to demonstrate that without cutting corners. Now, there's been a lot of, you'll read stories, and I think there'll be more stories coming out around things like greenwashing. And that's essentially investing in companies who are saying that they are doing green investments or doing green projects, when actually, when you look underneath the bonnet or the surface, is actually not as green as you would expect. So essentially misleading clients and investing in things which clients don't want to be investing in. So I think that's one of the key things for our industry, and I think it's a great opportunity, to be honest. One of the things that just to make sure that we think about the industry as a link to the real world, the investment industry or investment management provides a pipeline of funding to key investments within our economy. So it's a key driver behind the ability to go more green. It's a key driver behind our educational system, our universities. It's a key driver behind our healthcare systems. Being able to make sure that our funding is targeted in a way which improves our economic development and in a sustainable way is really important. So you'll see a lot of businesses and a lot of asset managers now turning towards, as I mentioned, ESG, turning more towards infrastructure, green infrastructure as well, which is very important. And I think for me, this is super exciting because, as I mentioned earlier, for me, I do this job not for the money, but for the betterment of the world. And actually being able to, in my own way, drive that's really important. So having this greater focus on are we doing good in the world, as our investments leading to better things in the world, is really important. And there's nowhere where it's going to be so meaningful and impactful than in emerging markets. And helping them to be able to choose better energy sources, build better energy infrastructure, so that their economies are from now greenified, rather than having built heavy coal power stations and things like that, and then 20 or 30 years having to spend more money to basically tear them down and put something more green in place. Being able to fund investment into kind of green technologies in emerging markets from now is so important for their development.
Yeah, thank you. For those people who'd like to find out more about a role as the role of sovereign analyst or the asset management industry in general, in addition to talking people, are there any other places online that you'd point them to, or books or podcasts or?
So I would say a lot of asset managers do open days. They do a lot of open outreach events. So if you go on to, I'm going to name a few here, but there's loads more. But for example, outreach by BlackRock, Vanguard, Fidelity, State Street, all of the kind of the big asset managers, they do open days with schools because it's not just part of their corporate responsibility, but also it's really important for them that the younger generation becomes responsible investors. So it's like it's a bit of self-preservation as well. And I would also say, in terms of kind of podcasts and things and materials to read, definitely things from the FT. The FT has some really good podcasts. I would say this is not necessarily industry specific, but things from Tim Harford. He's the undercover economist. Are very good if you are looking to basically understand economics applied to the world. He takes some of the biggest questions around which are happening in the UK and applies statistics and economics to them to answer them. So if you're not quite certain about how economics actually is applied to the rest of the world and how basically being a sovereign analyst kind of comes to fruition, I would say those are really good places to start. And then in addition, I think being able to follow when IMF kind of talks come out, because normally they have presentations going along to those, and just following that, and that will give you a good sense of what are the top hot topics that we're thinking about in our industry.
Super helpful. Thank you very much. And sometimes it can be quite taxing technically to read about these topics. So, listening is another great way to take in the information without, struggling with the terminology and so on. So I always recommend audiobooks and podcasts if you're struggling with just the plain text.
Yeah, there's a lot of international economics audiobooks available, a lot of them, and they make for fascinating reading.
Great, thank you. All right. Well, as we move towards wrapping up, Biola, what do you know now that you wish you'd known when you were just starting out in your career?
So what I know now, I wish I had. That's a very good question. What do I know now that I wish?
Well, how about I put it this way? What would you tell young Biola, who wanted to be a lawyer and had the whole world in front of her?
So I would say be very forthright with yourself about what your passions are. So don't just go with what other people are doing, but at the same time challenging yourself to think about whether that's actually right for you. And the reason why I say that was because, I went along to study economics because that was sort of, I liked it, I liked the subject. But then when I got to university, my love for economics very much diminished because it was very much focused, it felt like an applied mathematics course. And it felt like the reason I'd chosen economics was because that was sort of the done thing. That was one of the ways to get into a good university, a good career in finance, in investment banking or something like that. And I think it was only when I went to Paris and then I really challenged myself to think, what actually is it that makes me happy?
Yeah.
That I thought, actually, I don't want to go into investment bank. And this was what a lot of my friends were competing in order to get. So it felt very uncomfortable to say no to that when everyone was kind of trying really hard, doing lots of applications just to go to do an internship at these big institutions, to turn away and say, actually, that's not for me. I don't want to do that. It felt really scary. But ultimately, if you really, really check in with yourself, you can get a very good idea about what you want and where you want to be going. And I would say it's not necessarily saying to yourself, I always want to be an economist. Oh, I always want to be this profession. It's much deeper than that. Check in and ask yourself, what is it that makes you happy? and what do you want to be doing that makes you happy? And for me, that answer has always been, I want to be able to help people. I want to be able to help. I want to make sure that I have a positive influence in the world. And I also want to be able to make sure I have a good quality of life as well.
Yeah.
I want to be able to see my friends. I want to work hard, but I also want to have a good home life as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important to check in with yourself about what are the things which are important. And then if you know that those are your core values, then you can move into thinking, what am I actually good at? Well, I know I'm good at mathematics. I know I'm good at statistics. Okay, so where do I go from that? And what do I find interesting with those skill sets?
Yeah, I think that's really great advice, because I think it's very easy to go down a track and realise that you're completely out of line with your values. So I've experienced situations where I really value family and friends, but I've been in situations where I haven't had time to see my family and friends. So I'm operating out of line with my values, and that leads to burnout, unhappiness, and all sorts of other things. And so, know your values and kind of check in with them when you're making these decisions, because they will guide you ultimately.
Exactly. And check in, and don't be afraid to pursue them without don't be afraid to pursue them stringently.
Yeah, thank you. Now, Biola, I've got to ask you about the bikes. Tell us about the bikes.
So I love cycling. As you can see from the many bikes I have behind me, you won't be able to see, but I've got lots of bikes to the side. I've got some wheels on my ceiling. I've got another bike in front of me. I have a lot of bikes. Basically, I took up cycling in 2018, and I found a great cycling club called Velociposse. Absolutely loved it, and I was so blessed that I was able to start racing. I found a really, really good community, and then I wanted to give back, so I became chair of my cycling club, and I've been doing that for the last 3 years.
Yeah.
And trying to encourage more people to take up cycling. And so a little bit about my club, it's kind of an unusual one. It's an all-women's club, and we are very inclusive of women, trans women, and non-binary people. So we are champions of, not only marginalised people and marginalised genders cycling, but also those groups racing. And essentially, as I mentioned, I got the bug. I really doubled down on it, and I actually started a business in cycling, Cycle Together. And the whole idea behind Cycle Together is following on from the work that I've done in Velociposse, get more people who typically wouldn't do sport to start trying to cycle. And there's so many great things that cycling clubs around the UK are doing. It's all about trying to help them, do those a little bit better, help them with D&I. Help them as well to make sure that they're putting in place policies, initiatives which are encouraging of minorities within their locality, so that they feel great to join them on a ride. And then on the flip side, there's lots of invisible hurdles that people who are looking to get into cycling generally face. And one of the things that we're trying to do is try and tackle those by creating community, and a community whereby people can share their knowledge around, how to fix puncture, how to go on, what's the experience like to go to their first club ride, how to get fit enough to do that, all of those type of questions. And we're trying to build a supportive community. So before you get to that cycling club, you feel like you can do it, because you have this community who basically almost envelops you with love, and then also helps you graduate to your first club ride and then become a club cyclist and forever an addict like myself with cycling.
Oh, I love it. Well, good for you. That sounds like a great community to be part of. And I haven't taken up cycling yet. Well, apart from cycling to town on my bike with a basket, but I think I haven't done any
That's
proper
all right,
cycles.
That's still cycling. That's still cycling. That's still cycling.
Baby steps.
Exactly. And you know, when you want to go a bit further, you know where you can come.
I do. Thank you. So, I love a quote. Do you have a favourite quote or expression or motto that gets you through life?
Sure. So there's one which comes to mind. I think it's from Shakespeare, and this is probably me paraphrasing it. But life does not follow or obey the rules of a straight line. And I think that says so much. It's not, life can go like winding, it can go ups and downs, it can go to the side, but it's life.
Yeah.
So whatever comes your way, just take it, just keep going, keep on trucking. Opportunities will come, great highs, loads will come. So that's sad, but just keep on going. It does not, what you think is going to be, what you think will happen in 6 months' time, I assure you will not happen. Because it's not linear. Life is not linear.
Life is not linear. Thank you. That's great advice. Oh, Biola, thank you so much for joining us today. I've learned so much, and I'm confident that your audience are going to get great value out of this conversation. So thank you. Is there anything that you'd like to leave the audience with, words of encouragement or wisdom?
Sure. I think for me, it's really about keeping on trying and keep on going. You'll get knocks along the way, but that's okay. That's part of the journey, and it's going to make you so much stronger and more resilient. And it's okay. Trust me, we all went through it. We all went through the nose, but you will have that one yes. And trust me, that one yes will feel amazing. And I was so excited for you.
Well, Biola, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate your time. This has been amazing. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And I'm so happy to have been able to talk to you and to the audience. And if you have any questions, please just contact me on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for joining Biola and I today. We really hope you enjoyed the show. If you found any value in today's episode, please help us out by subscribing to the show and perhaps sharing with a friend or two. Thanks again for joining us. We will see you next time.
I